Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praise belong to Allah, the Lord of the universe. Blessing and salutations upon His final messenger, our Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, his family and his noble companions. Welcome everyone. My name is Fahad Siddiqui. I am the founder and the CEO of Mabrook, the first ever Islamic tokenization platform. I would like to welcome our guest, our Sheikh Mufti Ismail Desai. Mufti Ismail Desai is a Sharia advisor in investment banking at GIFS. He has been working as chairman, advisor, and consultant to various prestigious banks, financial institutions, and global funds. He also happens to be the chairman of Al Mabrook Sharia Board.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في حديث التاجر الصدوق الأمين مع النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the master and sustainer of the universe. May peace and blessings be upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the last and final messenger of Allah. Respected scholars, elders, brothers, sisters, and professional colleagues, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the hadith which I've quoted before you, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that a trustworthy, truthful trader will be with the pious ones, the prophets, on the day of Qiyamah. And indeed, this proves the importance of transparency, of truthfulness, honesty in our business and financial dealings. And this is the hallmark of a true Muslim. In fact, it appears in one hadith of Sahih Bukhari, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that if there are two transacting parties and فَإِنْ بَيَّنَا وَصَدَقَا بُورِكَ لَهُمَا فِي بِعِيمَا, that if they are both truthful and transparent, then there will be barakah and great amount of blessings in their transaction. And if they speak lies and they are not transparent, then muhiqat barakatu bay'ihima, that the barakah and the blessings of their transaction, that will also be fully destroyed. So when we hear of this word barakah, when we hear of this word blessings, then it is loosely translated in the English language as referring to barakah or blessings. But the reality of it is that barakah actually has three distinct meanings. And I would just like to quickly enumerate them, because the name of this podcast is Mabrook, and the source of Mabrook is barakah and blessings. So the first meaning is that an-numa wa ziyada, it refers to increase in wealth. Second is in terms of al-istihfaf, in other words, protection of wealth. And thirdly is in terms of al-istidama, in terms of continuity of wealth creation. So therefore, the word barakah, it has a more deeper technical meaning than simply being translated as blessings. Nevertheless, the point is that Islam promotes honesty, transparency, and truthfulness. Now, when it comes to this entire debacle of FTX and the subsequent crash and collapse of FTX, then we need to question ourselves that what could have been done differently, and does Islamic law, does Islamic finance and economics have the answers to the debacle and the crash at FTX? So inshallah, we will explore this further.
So with that quick introduction, inshallah, let's start our second podcast, which is about FTX crash and Islamic finance lesson. So Sheikh, the first question for you is that, can you give us an overview about all that happened?
So when it comes to FTX is the second largest crypto exchange globally. It was established in 2019, and it received approximately $2 billion in venture capital and private equity investment. And FTX also had some very strong cornerstone investors like Sequoia Capital, which had approximately $213 million invested, BlockFi, which had about $200 million, and various other name brand or institutional investors. And CoinDesk had recently published an article that stated that one of the subsidiary or sister entities of FTX called Alameda Research, serving as a treasury arm of FTX, had been receiving FTT, which is basically a reward token that FTX itself had created in exchange of fiat money that was being lent by FTX, or fiat money that was owned by FTX clients. So in other words, that Alameda was basically issuing FTT coins in exchange of cash or fiat money that was being held by FTX, which in actual fact was the funds of its own clients. So when it comes to the balance sheet of Alameda Research and FTX, a large portion of the balance sheet was based on this FTT reward token. And Alameda and both FTX were basically leveraging that balance sheet based on a token that was created out of thin air. And this basically caused Alameda to collapse and FTX to eventually file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings. And this has created a global contagion in the crypto space where, for example, BlockFi has frozen all withdrawals. Gemini, which is a leading crypto exchange, has also frozen all rewards from it, or from its staking program called Gemini Earn. So when we dissect FTX, we find very, very shoddy and poor governance. In actual fact, the balance sheet and the financials of FTX was not even audited. Right? And you find many of these private equity investors like Sequoia, etc., that did not even audit. They did not even audit, and they did not even have interviews with the CFO and the senior management of FTX. So this is what we term now as herd mentality. That even major investors, they also followed the herd, and they also believe that FTX was a good investment. So this is where we come to the lessons that we can draw from the collapse and the crash of FTX. Now, when it comes to the numbers, FTX was valued at $32 billion. And that valuation, to a large extent, was premised on the basis of its strong balance sheet. And when we look at the balance sheet, we find that the balance sheet was largely denominated in the form of this FTT tokens, which is basically like a reward token that FTX created out of thin air. And approximately, it is believed and it is estimated that FTX has about $8 to $10 billion that is missing in funds that is owed to its creditors, basically its clients, of approximately $1 million. And then there have also been certain claims that approximately $400 million of cash was transferred out of FTX to some subsidiary entities, etc. So that is basically, in brief, events that have led up to the collapse of FTX. Obviously, there is the issue of Binance. Binance basically had invested in FTX, and it had decided, to pull out by recalling all of its investment. And subsequent to that, it then decided to conduct a due diligence to potentially purchase FTX. And when it found out that there were so many inconsistencies, it had decided to very publicly denounce FTX and basically terminate any potential acquisition. So those are the facts when it comes to the collapse or the crash at FTX. Obviously, much more will be revealed as investigators start to proceed with the Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. What was the main reason for the crash of FTX?
I would say that there are three main reasons. The first is what I refer to as, a very poor lack of governance and oversight. And this is not, particular in terms of normal, regulatory oversight. what I'm referring here to is in terms of just normal governance, in terms of having audited financials, in terms of having, a proper management structure, in terms of ensuring that there is no conflict of interest. The reality of the situation is that the governance was so poor that one person ended up managing bank accounts. One person was basically managing the entire firm from top down, and those type of structures in today's modern contemporary world of business management does not really work. The second reason I would say is in terms of the incorrect practices of FTX in terms of simply replicating conventional traditional finance to crypto and blockchain. So when you have a CFI model that simply replicates TradFi or traditional finance, you have these inherent financial risks that did occur in 2008. So imagine having a derivative in traditional finance and then having a crypto derivative. Now, it's basically one and the same thing, right? In actual fact, a crypto derivative based on CFI may actually be more dangerous than a traditional finance or TradFi derivative or hedge. The third main reason why I believe FTX crashed, right, was simply in terms of what I call bias, that investors had succumbed to their bias, whether it's loss aversion bias, whether it's herd mentality, whether it's anchoring bias, whether it's hindsight bias, whether it's information bias, in the sense that they simply thought that if the entire industry is doing well, right, FTX is should be doing well, right? And that is a fundamental mistake that investors make, is that they think that they can simply apply what is happening across the industry to every single company, and that is the single largest mistake that an investor can make. So those I think are the three main reasons. Obviously, when it comes to the governance, there was clearly no transparency. There was a lot of fraud. This ended up basically being, it could potentially be the largest Ponzi scheme in history.
That's a very good insight, Sheikh. Thank you very much. What is the Islamic alternative to FTX?
I wouldn't really call it Islamic alternative to FTX, but what I would say is I would rather call it, the Sharia compliant or Islamic alternative or Islamic compliant alternative to, conventional crypto, conventional finance, whether it's traditional finance, whether it's crypto or even blockchain. And the Sharia compliant alternative is basically embedded in the principles of Sharia law. And Sharia law says basically that that you can only make a profit if you prepare to take a loss. So this concept of profit and loss sharing could be applied to this concept of crypto and blockchain, right? And remember that Islam is not opposed to innovation, and that is why it appears in one hadith: "Man amila shay'an falyutimhu." That person who does any action, then he should perfect it. So part of perfection is ensuring that you have such a high level of innovation that the entire world basically follows you. And we as a Muslim, ummah, as a Muslim nation, we were once, leaders when it came to innovation and growth. This is why we find that in the West, for example, Ibn Sina, who was a great philosopher and physician of his time, he is known as Avicenna. In Greek mythology, he is known as Avicenna. The inventor of algebra was actually a Muslim philosopher by the name of Al-Khawarizmi. So now we find that we as Muslim nations, we need to be at the forefront of innovation in terms of how we can provide unique value to the world. And I believe that there are certain aspects of blockchain and crypto in terms of banking the unbanked, in terms of providing greater utility value, in terms of DeFi, decentralized finance, by providing greater efficiencies to the financial system, that this could have a good impact on the world. I will not be going into too much depth from a Sharia finance perspective, but suffice it to say that first, Islamic finance promotes business ethics in the forms of transparency, honesty, truthfulness, just and fair labor relations. All of these principles are in Sharia law. Did you know that when it comes to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Islamic finance is already compliant with the UN SDGs? In actual fact, it is more compliant because it has greater, transparency, and it also does not have interest, which is uh, the greatest dilemma that the world faces. That if you are a wealthy nation, then because of your excess resources, you're able to basically economically enslave poorer countries and poorer people. And Islam is against that. Islam talks about partnership, of a risk sharing profit partnership between one person who has an idea and between another person that has the capital. It is not such that one person has the capital, then he feels that he can dominate everyone else. Right? Islam is against that type of model. So I therefore believe that Islamic finance, Islamic economics definitely has the answers and is the only alternative to the collapse of FTX.
Jazakallah Sheikh. Can something like this happen again in future?
Look, I believe that as long as we do not have the guardrails of transparency, of governance, of equality, of justice, then it will be very difficult to prevent the next FTX from happening. Remember that when the human being is left untamed, that the soul of the human being is unguarded, the passion of a human being is unguarded, the greed of a human being is unguarded, then it knows no limits. And we can see with the FTX that billions of dollars have been siphoned off and vanished. So tomorrow, what prevents the same thing from happening? Unless we address the moral regeneration and inefficiencies of global capitalism, then only will we see a change in economics and finance happening. Unless that happens, it will be extremely difficult to prevent the next FTX from happening.
Okay, got it. Should we still trust blockchain?
Look, there are always going to be good apples and bad apples. There are always going to be good actors and bad actors. I mean, for example, someone cannot say, Naudhu billah, that Islam is a bad religion. Islam is always a good religion, but you will have bad actors within Islam that will try to tarnish the image of Islam. But Islam is Islam. And so when it comes to these concepts of blockchain, crypto, etc., inherently on paper and in theory, these are better concepts that promote efficiencies, transparency, integrity of the financial and economic system. In practice, it remains to be seen, and it's still a nascent, sector. It's only been a few years. If you look at conventional finance, it's been around for hundreds of years, and this system will refine itself, and it should refine itself until it gets to a more efficient state. So, therefore, I believe that when it comes to crypto, when it comes to blockchain, we need to take the good of it and leave the bad of it.
Jazakallah Sheikh. What is the future for Islamic blockchain after this FTX debacle?
Yeah. So I believe that when it comes to Islamic blockchain, when it comes to Islamic crypto or Islamic fintech in general, that we need to start considering what is a more efficient system that has all of the principles of Sharia in terms of Sharia governance, Sharia orders, Sharia ethics, Sharia risk and liquidity management, but still being innovative enough to provide unique value creation to the world. And I'll give you a simple example. If you look at Africa alone as a continent, Africa has almost 55% Muslim population. So almost 530 million people on the African continent call themselves Muslim, which means that a vast majority of them are in poverty. They are impoverished. Many of them are on the verge of hunger because of famine, droughts, diseases. So certainly we can use the concepts of fintech, the concepts of blockchain to create an enhanced value system for these people. And this is what finance is all about. Finance is simply an intermediary process to provide value to the beneficiaries of finance. It is not only about how one person or one consortium or one group that possesses the capital that they can take advantage of the poorer people and suck the blood out of them. The objective of finance is basically to be a source of spreading good and using finance as a tool to create further value in the world. So I believe that the future looks good for Islamic finance, and if we can only look at creating something innovative where we can provide real value and we can abstain and stay away from replicating conventional finance, then I think we will be on the right track.
That's great. Thank you. How to stay safe from the situation like this after what happened with FTX?
Very good question. And, the SEC of the United States have documented a detailed article on the different scams that happen in crypto. And I would just like to, mention a few of them. And I would like to highlight what I term as investment biases. So when it comes to investment, firstly, make sure that you don't have a particular bias towards an investment. So the first bias is, for example, herd mentality. If everyone else is buying it, I don't necessarily need to buy it. They may be simply buying it because they haven't done their research. It's herd mentality. Secondly is loss aversion. If you lost money previously in crypto, that doesn't mean you lose money again. Thirdly is in terms of anchoring bias. Anchoring bias now means that, for example, if Bitcoin is doing well, it means that all the other cryptos are probably doing well. Fourthly is in terms of hindsight bias. Then you have information bias, restraint bias. So as human beings, we have certain inherent biases, and we need to ensure that we don't fall victim to those biases. Secondly is ensure that there's proper governance of the structures you're looking to invest in. Make sure that financials are audited, there's a proper balance sheet. And one important point I would like to mention is when it comes to the investment world, make sure that there's a third party, almost like a custody provider, that will be able to verify the value of the crypto holdings of that particular company. Right? Sometimes, if you look at FTX, this is a classic example that had FTX had a third party provider that was credible and they could properly, independently verify the holdings of FTX, we would not have this debacle. And that is why I always say in finance that finance is an intermediary business, and in an intermediary business, you have to create the rail. You have to create the guardrails of security and trust in the system. So therefore, I would say that investors should now take heed. They need to think very carefully of where they invest their funds, what are their objectives, and they should make sure that they do not fall to normal biases in terms of investments. I would like to conclude this session by stating two things. One is that from an Islamic perspective, we as Muslims need to be more astute, we need to be more informed, we need to be more well aware of the investments that we get ourselves involved in. Unfortunately, because of lack of education, because of lack of awareness, because of lack of in-depth research, we simply gamble away our funds in the next best thing, hoping for the best return. The most serious investors, the most sophisticated investors, they conduct proper research. They are in it for the long term. And sometimes when we invest for the short term to make quick returns, then we end up losing our funds. Remember that your wealth, it is an amanat, it is a trust from the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we cannot abuse that amanat and the trust. Second point I would like to mention is that when it comes to innovation in finance, and more specifically in terms of Islamic finance, then we need to think very carefully of what we innovate. It should not simply be That we have crypto, then we have traditional finance that simply replicates crypto and blockchain. Then, in other words, we have created the same of what we had before. So there's no real benefit of having crypto. The one main reason why we have crypto and blockchain is so that we can come up with unique alternatives that create further value to the world. And if we are doing the same thing that we have done in traditional finance, then there's no value creation. And one example of this is this Mabrook um, peer-to-peer system, where inshallah there could be great amount of value created, where people would be able to invest in ventures which are Sharia compliant. They could also lend to these ventures in a Sharia compliant manner, and it is based on a peer-to-peer basis. So I believe that with the proper guardrails in place from a governance perspective, audit perspective, etc., that the future looks bright, and we need to think forward of how we can create more innovation in the space and deliver greater value, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Jazakallah. That concludes our podcast. I hope our listeners benefited from Sheikh today. Please do visit our website almabrook.io. Follow us on social media, and see you on the next podcast. Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.